widely and immediately noted, the terms of the armistice are such that the reign of slaughter is over. Germany was beaten, and it agreed to terms that were designed to prevent it from reigniting the war. Different names were used that day to describe the agreement, from German surrender and Allied triumph and victory to truce, ceasefire and cessation, or simply the end. But peace was the key word on 11 November 1918. The peace today is seen as temporary, even illusory, but that isn't how it was seen at the time. Peace was the word being shouted. It was peace at last. At last, said the Times. At long last, cried the Chester Chronicle. The day of peace was, however, far from peaceful. Peace broke out even more enthusiastically than war had 4 years before. The guns at the front fell silent, and the towns erupted into noise. In Britain, as 11 a.m. arrived, the Prime Minister told the crowd outside 10 Downing Street that they were entitled to rejoice, and they did. The celebrations were widespread, joyous, and excited. There were big rejoicings in Warwickshire, great rejoicings in Chatham, Portsmouth, and Lincolnshire, universal jubilation in Canterbury, tumultuous rejoicing in South Shields, general rejoicing throughout the town in Darlington. In Birkenhead, the majority of the people gave themselves up to rejoicing. At Liverpool, on the other side of the Mersey, there was indescribable joy and enthusiasm. Newspapers described how Londoners left work early in order to fill the streets with rejoicing. The Times reporting on happy crowds in London and rejoicings throughout the country. The Evening Times in Glasgow reported general rejoicings, and the Lord Mayor of Birmingham said that it has been a day of great rejoicing and thanksgiving. The rejoicing is a recurring feature of memoirs, letters, and newspapers. The poet John Masefield considered it a joyous thing to see the Strand in London filled with yelling, cheering, flag-waving, and singing soldiers. In possibly the best poem about 11 November, The Day of Victory, to My City, written in Gloucester on the night after, Ivor Gurney describes the rejoicing crowd with their laughter gay, and he himself considered it glorious news. And much rejoicing even among the aliens was recorded in the ledger of an internment camp on the Isle of Man. In Ireland, the Wicklow newsletter pronounced that there was unexampled rejoicing in every part of the British Empire, and that in France demonstrations of enthusiasm were universal. Celebrations in the USA were equally enthusiastic, despite the fact that the news arrived early in the morning or during the night because of the time difference. The day was a vast party with its drinking, music, dancing, fancy costumes, romance, beauty, vulgarity, and vandalism, with people coming and going, paths crossing, and strange encounters taking place, and crowds that swelled, surged, dispersed, and re-emerged. With its joy, its euphoria, its spirit of friendship, but with some people crying in corners, some standing silent in a crowd, and with its optimism, goodwill, stupidity, disappointments, and anger. On Armistice Day 1918, planning, rational debate, and politics ended before the day had barely begun, and well before the fighting ceased a few hours later, and then instinct, faith and emotion, and sounds and movement took over. One word often used was carnival. It was a day of fantasy and release in which normal life was turned upside down. Repeatedly it was said that words could not capture the feelings of the day. It was a day wonderful beyond words. And among the crowds there were different reasons for being happy, involving relief, gratitude, security, freedom, pride, optimism, lust, nostalgia, hope, drink, and childishness. And much excitement was simply engendered by the fun and weirdness of the celebrations themselves. In Birmingham, the Lord Mayor called it the greatest day in the history of our country, and few would have disagreed. No one shied away from grand statements. This was the end of the most horrific war. The armistice came out of Armageddon. But some accounts play down the extent of rejoicing in Britain on the day. H.G. Wells, in The Outline of History, describes crowds in London on 11 November, but notes that although squibs and crackers were thrown about, there was little concerted rejoicing. And in A People's History of London...